What is that?
It's just breaching conditions, so I just need you to step out of the vehicle, okay? So you are under arrest, sir. We need you to exit the vehicle, please, okay?
Okay, everyone. May God bless you and keep you. The harassment in Canada is continuing.
He's been charged for breach of probation for failing to do community service hours in that first month following the order. There was some issues being able to find a place for him to donate his time because of his vaccine status. So a lot of places that would ordinarily take volunteers would not take the Pawlowskis because of their vaccine status.
Adam Sos here for Rebel News with an update for you on Dawid Pawlowski's arrest. For those who don't know, Dawid Pawlowski is Pastor Artur Pawlowski's brother. He, along with Pastor Artur Pawlowski, have garnered the ire of government officials and healthcare bureaucrats for ultimately opening their church, feeding the homeless, preaching to some truckers at the Coutts blockade, and ultimately for daring to question COVID-19 restrictions over these past 2 years. You likely know that Pastor Artur Pawlowski, for those alleged crimes, sits in jail and has been denied bail until this very day. Well, Pastor Dawid Pawlowski was arrested the other day himself as well. He only spent 14 hours behind bars. He was released thanks to the tireless efforts of Sarah Miller of JSS Barristers, who, thanks to your donations at saveartur.com, was able to fight for him and secure his release. She's going to be joining me in just a moment now to provide me an update on the situation and how she secured his release, but more importantly to discuss the circumstances leading up to his arrest.
So what the bail package indicated was that he was charged with breach of probation of Justice Germain's order. So Justice Germain's order is where he's found in civil contempt of Justice Rook's order. So it is a complicated process, but essentially Justice Rook issued this order. Justice Germain found Dawid Pawlowski and Artur Pawlowski in contempt and sanctioned them, including a very lengthy probation period. And so now Dawid has been arrested pursuant to that order from Justice Germain, which is currently under appeal and going to be heard by the Court of Appeal in June. What the charges said was that he's been charged for breach of probation for failing to do community service hours in that first month following the order. There was some issues being able to find a place for him to donate his time because of his vaccine status. So a lot of places that would ordinarily take volunteers would not take the Pawlowskis because of their vaccine status. So we do have that issue to deal with. Whether or not those charges are pursued by the Crown will be seen. And then a duplicate charge from the Jason Copping event. So he's already been charged with breach of Rook's order for January 1st, and now he's being charged with breach of Germain's order. So you can see how the police and the law enforcement are using this to be able to arrest them kind of at will when it's convenient for them, when it's inconvenient for the Pawlowskis. There's no reason why that charge couldn't have been laid and dealt with back in January 1. Instead, now we're 2 months later and Dawid is being arrested and charged for this, and it's a duplication. I mean, it's the same events, the same act, leading to two separate criminal charges. The Crown knows they can't convict on both.
And so the thing that I want to maybe clarify, or that I'm sure people are wondering out there, the authorities have your contact information. This is an existing charge. Why does it seem to keep happening that they're randomly being stopped somewhere and then realizing there's a warrant out for their arrest? Is it just bureaucracy, ineptitude? Is it unwillingness to enact these warrants? What's happening so that these arrests are taking place like this?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I don't have disclosure. I don't have any evidence to say why it's happening like this. What we do see in the criminal justice system, and this is pretty common and it's commented on by judges, is that the whole process is used and designed to penalize people and to coerce their cooperation, right? So it could be in this circumstance that they're delaying on pursuing charges and delaying on laying charges and issuing outstanding warrants rather than showing up at Dawid's house and arresting, charging him and arresting him and releasing him immediately because of, some nefarious reason. It could be, as you say, ineptitude. It could just be bureaucracy, right? They have a process, they fill out a form, they they don't have any intent behind it. They're just, churning through their gears. So it's hard to say at this point. But what is clear is that these charges are overly aggressive, I would say, based on what we have before the court right now, and unnecessary and duplicative of charges that have already been laid. So definitely problematic.
Certainly. And one of the things also that I'm very much struggling to understand is that this ruling, effectively, that he's being charged on the probation breach for, is being appealed. Certain components have been stayed. I believe Justice Germain's compelled speech order, which stipulated that effectively a state-prepared paragraph needed to be stated at the end of any public speech criticizing COVID-19 restrictions. Was it that the community service element was maintained and those other elements were stayed?
Yeah, exactly. So Justice Germain made this really extensive order after the contempt sanctioning the Pawlowskis. We are appealing that, but we also made an application back in the fall to stay the sanction pending appeal. Now, we were largely successful in having the compelled speech provision stayed and requirements to stay within the province. But the fines and costs, those were already paid by the time we got to the Court of Appeal application, and so those were not stayed. The Court of Appeal decided that it wasn't necessary, considering it was already attended to. And the other aspect was the probation. So the Pawlowskis are checking in with probation, and they have certain probation conditions that they still need to apply with until we hopefully get the Germain sanction and finding of contempt overturned at the Court of Appeal.
And I suppose the sort of final question that I would have for you was, would it be typical for someone who's willing to do community service, and basically because of what could be considered a medical condition, his vaccination status prevented him from being able to access and do that service? Is it typical for an arrest and even short incarceration to occur as a result of being willing to but not being able to perform volunteer service?
That is a difficult question to answer, because it really depends on your probation officer and how they want to exercise their discretion. Many probation officers absolutely would be flexible with the person who's subject to the probation order, but that doesn't necessarily mean they have to be, and that doesn't necessarily mean that all are. In this case, apparently the probation officer decided that it wasn't in her interests or in her mandate to be flexible and considerate of the challenges that Dawid was facing.
Well, certainly I don't think there's much flexibility or consideration towards the Pawlowskis. They seem to go after the most extreme possible prosecution in every instance whatsoever, further leading many to suggest that Artur, and now for at least a brief while again Dawid, are very much political prisoners being silenced for daring to question government authorities. Sarah, I want to thank you for the update. I know you've been working tirelessly on this. If you want to keep Sarah working hard on this case, you can go to saveartur.com. The donations you make there go to the Democracy Fund. You will receive a tax receipt, and they will be used to keep Sarah Miller and the team at JSS Barristers working on behalf of the Pawlowskis. Everyone deserves fair legal defense. I want to thank you all so much for tuning in. For Rebel News, I'm Adam Sos. Pawlowski family has been relying on your generous support to ensure that they have their fair shot in court. Everyone deserves legal representation. The government shouldn't be able to bully people and shove them around just because they've got more money to spend. That's why we started crowdfunding a legal defense for Pastor Artur Pawlowski and his family, including Dawid Pawlowski, at saveartur.com. Any donations that you make to their legal defense go to the Democracy Fund, a registered Canadian charity. So you'll receive a tax receipt for your contribution, and you will ensure that Pastor Artur and Dawid Pawlowski receive the best legal defense money can buy.